In the year 1876, Wyoming was still a frontier town, marked by rough edges and a sense of untamed freedom. The air often carried the scent of wood smoke mingled with the crispness of the mountains. But beneath its rugged surface lay a community bound by strict codes and unyielding expectations. In this small town, men often held all the power, their voices echoing through the saloon doors while women navigated the shadows, striving to carve out their presence in a world that preferred their silence. Nora Bell was one such woman who refused to be silenced. With her fiery auburn hair and determined spirit, she lived her life according to her own principles. Nora was known for her sharp wit and fearless demeanor, drawing admiration from some and scorn from others. Yet, in a society where men were expected to lead and women were meant to follow, Nora found herself at odds with the local authority, particularly Deputy Sheriff Wilkins. Wilkins was a man accustomed to having his way. His status meant that many feared him. His self-importance grew each time he put his badge on. When he set his sights on Nora during one smoky evening at the local saloon, he expected her to comply with his advances as others might have. Instead, she stood her ground, spurning his unwanted attention with equal parts indignation and resolve. The incident stirred whispers throughout town. Many women nodded at Nora's bravery. After all, it wasn't every day that someone stood up against a man with such power. But the applause of other women did little to shield Nora from retaliation. When Wilkins exacted revenge by charging her with disturbing the peace, it served more as an insult than anything else. Everyone knew that she had embarrassed him, and that her punishment was less about law and order and more about preserving a fragile ego. That night in the jail cell felt cold and cruel, as Nora sat alone on the hard bench, allowing her fierce spirit to turn inward for solace. She listened to the wind howl outside, carrying with it tales of frosty discontent from those who dared challenge authority. Her heart raced as she imagined how easily things could go wrong in this unforgiving place. Though she was locked away behind rusted bars, she felt an overwhelming sense of freedom inside, a stubborn refusal to let Wilkins or anyone else define who she was. As midnight approached, an eerie stillness enveloped the jailhouse like a chilling blanket. Suddenly, an earth-shattering bang echoed through the building, shaking the walls like thunder strikes across the mountains. The front door burst open with a violent force that sent splinters flying into the cold night air. Standing, framed in the doorway, was a silhouette cloaked in snowflakes and darkness. Silas Boone, the town's long-exiled blacksmith. Once thought dead in a terrible mining accident years ago, he emerged from obscurity like a ghost returning for retribution. His skin was gray with coal dust, and ash clung stubbornly to his clothes as if he had clawed his way back from beneath a heap of rock and regret. Nora could hardly believe her eyes. Memories flooded back. Silas's laughter ringing through the workshop as he hammered metal into shape, skilled hands creating beauty from raw materials. Now, here he stood before her alive against all odds, an emblem of survival and defiance. He said nothing at first, but met her gaze with a steady nod. It was as if they shared an unspoken understanding. The weight of humiliation she faced mirrored what he had endured during his own time away from town. Without hesitation or words exchanged, Nora rose from her bench under Silas's silent command. He had come for her. Together they stepped out into the swirling snowstorm that raged outside, a storm built not only from nature but from years of neglect toward those pushed into corners by society's rigid structures. As they vanished into the night together, neither considered themselves heroes nor legends. They were simply two souls united in their quest for freedom amid chaos. By morning, light breaking over Wyoming's horizon, Whispers circulated through town about what had happened in that jail cell overnight. Was it justice? A myth personified? As townsfolk stared at the empty jail, the remnants of last night's storm still drifting through memory, they pondered fervently whether they had witnessed an act of courage or merely another story born from wild imaginations fueled by fear and wonderment alike. Nora Bell was a woman who refused to fit into the neatly defined boxes that society had crafted for her. In a time when women were expected to remain quiet and obedient, she stood out like a wildflower breaking through the cracks in a dusty path. With her vibrant auburn hair, which caught the sun like flames dancing in the wind, and her striking green eyes, Nora commanded attention wherever she went. People knew her, not just for her beauty, but for her fierce spirit that could ignite conversations and stir passions. Living in Wyoming's rough-and-tumble environment, Nora learned early on that survival required more than just physical strength. It demanded resilience and an unwavering sense of self. Growing up among the rugged townsfolk, she watched as women around her bowed under pressure, whether from the men in their lives or from the social expectations that kept them tethered. But Nora's heart beat with a different rhythm. She yearned for freedom, not just the physical kind, but the freedom to express herself without fear of reprimand. Her independence often drew admiration as well as ire. Women in town whispered tales of her bravery, recounting how she once confronted a group of men who tried to belittle a fellow female shopkeeper. They marveled at how Nora had stood tall, fists clenched and chin raised high, challenging their authority until they slinked away in shame. Yet, with every act of defiance came consequences, like when she turned down Deputy Sheriff Wilkins' unwanted advances at the saloon. Wilkins was a man who thrived on control, and he was not used to being rejected. His authority made him feel invincible, and he took pride in his position within the community. To him, power was like a warm blanket. It shielded him from vulnerability and doubt. When Nora publicly dismissed him at the saloon, a place where he believed he held sway, it was not just an embarrassment. It was an affront to everything he believed in. The townsfolk witnessed this clash but dared not intervene. They understood well enough that crossing Wilkins could have dire consequences. As news spread about her arrest, some townspeople rallied behind Nora's cause quietly, while others hastily distanced themselves from her fate. It was unsettling to witness such an imbalance of power play out in their small community. Those who supported her were mostly women yearning for change, but felt too afraid to voice their solidarity openly for fear of retaliation from men like Wilkins. In jail that cold night, Nora reflected on these relationships. The friends who had once laughed with her now seemed distant shadows against the stark reality of her confinement. She thought about how easily people turned their backs when faced with danger or discomfort. Yet she also recognized the strength simmering beneath those silences. Perhaps one day they would find their voices too. Despite being locked away, Nora felt a surge of courage bubble within her, a flame refusing to be snuffed out by mere bars and walls. She was determined to confront whatever came next with strength rather than despair. In those quiet moments before Silas Boone's dramatic entrance, she envisioned what freedom might look like, not just for herself, but for all women who dared to challenge norms. Silas's arrival marked a turning point, not only in Nora's life, but potentially in the lives of many others in town who longed for liberation from oppressive expectations. As she stepped outside into the swirling snowstorm beside him, they became symbols of hope. Two souls united against arbitrary boundaries drawn by society. In this small Wyoming town, where whispers carried as much weight as shouts, Nora's legacy began that night. Not merely as a woman who stood up to a deputy sheriff, but as someone whose actions could inspire others to rise alongside her. there would be no more silence. Together with Silas by her side, she would light the way for those seeking justice and truth amid shadows cast by fear and uncertainty. As they ventured into the unknown together, it was clear that change was on the horizon. A change sparked by courage and fueled by unity among those yearning for something more than what had been handed down through generations before them. The saloon was alive with laughter and chatter that night, a world of its own where men gathered to drink and debate, filled with the scent of whiskey and the warmth of camaraderie. It was the heart of town life, where tales of old were exchanged over clinking glasses and booming voices. In this boisterous haven, a man could feel invincible, especially when he wore a badge like Deputy Sheriff Wilkins. As Nora Bell stepped through the wooden doors, the saloon fell momentarily quiet, eyes turning toward her with a mix of admiration and wariness. She was a striking figure with her auburn hair cascading down her back and her green dress swaying gently as she moved. But, like a wildflower blooming amid cracks in concrete, her bold presence could also inspire unease, particularly among men accustomed to calling the shots. Wilkins leaned against the bar, his expression hardened, but arrogance painted across his face like a mask. His friends chuckled softly at their inside jokes, but all eyes shifted to Nora as she ordered a drink. They knew that confronting her was no mere sport. It was fraught with potential repercussions. However, underestimating Wilkins' need to reclaim his pride would prove to be her misstep that fateful evening. With bravado born from too many drinks, Wilkins straightened and sauntered over to where Nora stood. The tension in the room thickened as he loomed closer, asserting dominance simply by invading her space. "What are you doing here alone, Nora?" he asked, voice dripping with condescension as he leaned in closer. "A pretty woman like you ought not to be wandering about without protection." Nora met his gaze unflinchingly, defiance woven into her every word. "I'm quite capable of looking after myself, Deputy." Her voice rang out clear and strong despite the clamor around them, challenging the unwritten rule that a woman needed male supervision. She felt the weight of all eyes upon her. The patrons leaned closer with curiosity, eager to witness this power struggle. Wilkins stumbled for words. He wasn't accustomed to being dismissed so publicly. "That's not how it works around here," he retorted angrily, attempting to cloak his embarrassment in authority. "You know the law expects women to behave appropriately." A ripple of discontent washed over the onlookers. Some men looked uncomfortable, while others silently cheered for Nora's boldness. Women shared glances filled with understanding. A flicker of hope passed through them as they witnessed one of their own standing up against oppression. "Appropriately?" Nora echoed incredulously. "Because you're wearing a badge? I won't let your definition of appropriate confine me." Their confrontation became more than just personal. It illustrated the deeper struggles between gender roles and authority rife within society itself. Wilkins's face reddened as humiliation morphed into rage. He knew he had lost this battle, but he couldn't afford further dissent to erode his fragile grip on power. "You'll regret this," he hissed, before storming away from their confrontation along with a few jeers from those who dared stand behind him. In an unfortunate twist of fate, Wilkins decided to take action, a move motivated not by concern for law or order, but rather a desperate need for control. He later charged Nora with disturbing the peace, claiming she had caused chaos in an establishment meant for men like him. A feeble reminder that the battlefield for respect extended far beyond physical confrontations. As rumors spread through town about Nora's arrest soon after their heated exchange at the saloon, discussions flared. Was it justice or oppression? Men lashed out defensively, while women supported each other quietly yet fervently. Shoulders squared against their shared plight amidst whispers of rebellion, lying beneath similar experiences faced daily across their lives. That evening marked a pivotal point, not just for Nora, but for everyone involved. A catalyst igniting flames within hearts long stifled by societal norms seeking compliance instead of authenticity. Determined to confront not merely personal indignities but also those shared collectively among women finding strength together. Nora rested inside her cell that night, holding on to hope as tightly as she clutched dreams tucked away for safekeeping amid shadows encroaching upon daylight. Little did they know how events would unfold. Outside those jail walls lurked Silas Boone, the blacksmith resurrected among dust past, a force aiming towards change arriving like an avalanche ready to roll over barriers that constrained both him and Nora alike. As midnight struck faintly across Wyoming skies glimmering below starlit wonders above, the stage was set for something extraordinary about to emerge, amid tumultuous waves crashing against rigid shores, eager for transformation, built on courage instead of despair. Nora's world felt confined within the cold walls of the jail cell, each shadow stretching into shapes that danced in her mind. The charge of disturbing the peace hung over her like a dark cloud, but she knew full well that it was merely a cover for something deeper. Outside, whispers filled the air among townsfolk gathering to discuss her arrest, each conversation a reflection of their biases and fears. "Did you hear about Nora?" one woman said softly to another, their heads bent close together as they passed by the jail. "They say she brought it on herself." "I heard Wilkins was furious after she rejected him at the saloon," replied her companion, eyebrows raised with intrigue. "He won't let that go unpunished." The hypocrisy in their words grated on Nora's nerves. Why did men like Wilkins wield so much power over women's lives? It wasn't just about law and order. It was about control, a desperate attempt to maintain dominance in a world where women were expected to follow without question. While they openly criticized her, they were blinded to the fact that it was Wilkins's fragile ego that truly disturbed the peace. In contrast, Nora reflected on her own strength. She had faced him down without flinching. What infuriated him most was not just her refusal of his advances, but his inability to enforce compliance through intimidation, a weapon he wielded against those weaker than himself. Now, here she sat, alone yet resolute, no longer willing to allow herself or any other woman to be defined by men like Wilkins. As night settled in, muffled sounds from the saloon reached her ears, a mix of laughter and raucous comments exchanged by patrons who remained blissfully unaware of how their words impacted lives outside those bar doors. They were likely cheering for him now, validating his actions as if they were righteous rather than vindictive. "Justice," she whispered to herself bitterly, feeling the irony wash over her like icy water. The true injustice lay not in her defiance, but in the reaction it sparked among those who thought they could dictate how a woman should behave. Then there were more whispers, this time from other cells nearby, echoes of similar stories shared in confessions or sobs from women imprisoned for reasons far less significant than hers. Even through bars meant to separate them physically, they all felt connected by an underlying current of shared struggle against an oppressive system. As dawn approached, Nora held on to hope tightly like a talisman against fear, a belief that perhaps things could change. She thought about Silas Boone, the blacksmith whom many believed had perished long ago in a mining accident. His unexpected return could very well shift everything. He had always forged connections among people with his warmth and skill at crafting metal into something beautiful. Yet here she was, locked away because someone felt embarrassed instead of taking responsibility for their actions and facing consequences like anyone else would when crossing boundaries established through respect rather than force. Suddenly, there came a deafening crash outside. The sound echoed ominously through the walls of the jailhouse and shook Nora from her thoughts. Was it thunder? A storm brewing? Or perhaps something else entirely? Then it happened. The front door burst open with such violence that splinters flew outward like shrapnel in a battle zone. Standing silhouetted against swirling snowflakes was Silas Boone himself, a figure cloaked in soot and dust from years spent laboring tirelessly at his craft. He looked every bit alive as he stepped into view. The not-so-dead blacksmith emerging through adversity returned at precisely the right moment. Without uttering a single word, he met Nora's gaze with purpose written across every line of his face. He nodded once as if affirming their shared understanding. They had both endured long battles against an unforgiving world. With adrenaline surging through her veins anew, Nora rose from her bench without hesitation, instinctively following Silas out into the frigid night air now tinged with urgency and possibility. With each step forward together emerged boldness, overthrowing doubts about what lay ahead. Not merely escape, but liberation, waiting patiently under layers hidden beneath prior struggles, seeking freedom, finally materializing. The townspeople who witnessed this extraordinary scene unfolding before them stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief, wondering whether this would mark justice or simply become another tale, spun from imagination rooted deeply within fear, echoed endlessly throughout history, longing deeper connections forged amid courage, rising above impression-shaped, shackled generations onward forevermore. The jail cell felt like a tomb, cold and dark, as Nora sat on the hard wooden bench, her breath visible in the frigid air. The walls were made of rough-hewn stone, exuding an oppressive chill that seeped into her very bones. She could hear the wind howling outside, its mournful cries echoing through the narrow slits in the walls, as if nature itself lamented her fate. Each gust was a reminder of her isolation, amplifying the sense of hopelessness that crept into her mind like shadows closing in on all sides. The dim light from a solitary lantern flickered in the corner, casting eerie shapes on the walls that danced with every flicker. Nora's heart raced as she contemplated her situation. Imprisoned for daring to stand up for herself against Deputy Sheriff Wilkins. Disturbing the peace, they called it. But she knew the truth. It was about control and power. The thought fueled her defiance. She refused to let fear undermine her spirit. Sitting alone, she replayed the confrontation in the saloon, each moment etched into her memory like an indelible mark. Wilkins's face had twisted with rage as she had rejected his advances. She could still see the disbelief in his eyes when she asserted her independence. For him, it had been more than just embarrassment. It was a challenge to his authority that he wouldn't tolerate. Now, as she sat reflecting on her choices, she felt both vulnerable and empowered. The darkness surrounding her amplified her thoughts, forcing her to confront what it meant to be a woman in a world ruled by men. Nora clenched her fists tightly as anger pulsed through her veins. How could they expect women to remain silent when men like Wilkins abused their power? She felt pride in her actions. She had not backed down when faced with intimidation. Yet the chilling atmosphere of the cell threatened to snuff out that flame of determination. It was cold and unyielding, much like the attitudes of those who had condemned her. Outside the barred window, snowflakes fluttered down like whispers of freedom, each one a reminder of what lay beyond these walls. Her mind drifted back to the life she had known, the warmth of the sun on her skin, the laughter shared with friends at the marketplace, and the sense of community that seemed so distant now. All of it felt suspended while she sat trapped in this dreary limbo, waiting for someone to come and rescue her from this nightmare. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the jail, a deep rumble that shook the very foundations of her confinement. It was unlike anything she had heard before, a deafening bang followed by splintering wood. Panic surged through her as she instinctively scrambled to her feet, pressing against the bars to peer into the darkness beyond. Was help finally coming, or had trouble found its way to her? As if answering her silent plea, the heavy door burst open with jarring force. Shadows danced wildly across the cell as light flooded in from outside, revealing a figure standing silhouetted against swirling snowflakes. A man clad in soot and coal dust. Silas Boone. The sight of him took her breath away. Here was someone once thought lost to time and tragedy now re-emerging at a moment when hope felt almost extinguished. Without a word spoken, Silas met Nora's gaze with understanding etched into his features. His presence breathed new life into her stagnant despair, igniting a flicker of hope within her heart that had long been buried beneath layers of fear. In that instant, everything changed. There was no longer a feeling of confinement, but rather an awakening, a realization that courage could ignite change even from within these darkened walls. Nora stepped forward instinctively toward Silas as he offered a subtle nod of encouragement. The cold air wrapped around them like a cloak as they moved together into the night. Freedom beckoning them forward into unknown territories outside this prison's reach. With each step emerged a fresh surge of determination. She would not be defined by what had happened here, nor by the whims of men who sought power over others. The townspeople who would witness their escape remained oblivious to what transpired between them. Their faces, frozen in disbelief, would soon grapple with questions they hadn't dared consider before. Was this justice unfolding before their eyes, or merely another legend born from wild imagination? As Nora and Silas stepped into the swirling snowstorm, the chilling winds carried not only their breaths, but also possibilities yet unseen. An opportunity for transformation awaited them both beyond this night's darkness. As the clock in the town square struck midnight, an eerie stillness settled over the jail, amplifying the tension that hung in the air. Nora Bell sat on the cold wooden bench of her cell, heart racing with uncertainty and anticipation. The oppressive darkness felt almost alive, curling around her like a suffocating shroud, while shadows danced in rhythm with her anxious thoughts. Each tick of the clock echoed in the silence, reminding her that time was slipping away. Suddenly, a deafening bang resonated through the building, shaking the very walls of her confinement. The noise reverberated in her chest like cannon fire, sending a jolt of adrenaline coursing through her veins. Nora jumped to her feet, pressing against the bars of her cell, eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. Was it an earthquake? Had someone come to rescue her? Or had trouble finally found its way to her? The sound repeated itself. A violent crash followed by splintering wood, as if an unseen force was tearing through the very fabric of her imprisonment. Nora's heart pounded louder than ever, drowning out her thoughts as she strained to see beyond the door that held her captive. What was happening outside? Would this be the moment when everything changed? Then, without warning, the heavy front door burst open with a force that sent splinters flying into the night air. Nora's breath hitched in her throat as she caught sight of a figure emerging from the storm outside. A man cloaked in soot and coal dust, standing resolute against swirling snowflakes. It was Silas Boone, the town's long-exiled blacksmith, thought dead after a mining collapse years ago. In that moment, time seemed to freeze as their eyes locked. Silas stood there like a beacon of hope against the bleakness surrounding them, and Nora felt a rush of emotions flood over her: relief, joy, disbelief. He had returned. She wanted to shout his name but found herself speechless, caught in the intensity of his presence. Silas didn't utter a word. Instead, he nodded slowly at Nora as if to convey an unspoken message. His look was one of understanding and determination. It promised that they would face whatever came next together. In his silence lay a shared history filled with unyielding strength. He had always been someone who forged connections, whether through metal or bonds forged in loyalty. Adrenaline surged through Nora as she took a step toward him instinctively. This was not just about escape, but also about seizing an opportunity for change. The darkness that had threatened to consume her now transformed into a backdrop for newfound courage, the realization that she was not alone. With Silas standing before her, she felt emboldened to defy not only Wilkins, but also every unspoken rule that had tried to keep women like her confined and silent. They were no longer merely individuals bound by societal expectations. They were allies standing against oppression together. As Silas moved closer to the cell door, he reached for the lock with steady hands. The sound of metal clinking echoed within those cold walls, a chorus signaling freedom and possibility. Nora could hardly breathe as anticipation tinged the air with electricity. Would this be their moment of liberation? With one swift motion, the lock clicked open, and Silas swung the door wide. The frigid wind rushed in like a wild animal released from captivity, wrapping around them both as they stepped into its embrace together. Outside lay a world transformed by snow, a blank canvas where anything was possible. Nora felt exhilaration wash over her as they crossed the threshold into freedom. Each step forward was imbued with purpose and determination. She could hear whispers from townsfolk who had gathered nearby, some frozen in disbelief, while others stared wide-eyed as if witnessing a miracle unfold before them. What will they think? She wondered briefly, as glances darted toward them filled with curiosity and confusion. But in that moment, Nora realized it didn't matter what they believed. Their journey was an act of defiance against the constraints that sought to hold them back. As they stepped into the swirling storm together, Silas guiding her forward, Nora felt hope bloom within her chest like a flower breaking through winter's grip. This wasn't just an escape. It was a declaration of resilience and strength against all odds. Together they ventured into the unknown, a path that might lead them toward justice, or perhaps forge new legends born from courage rising above fear. With each footprint left behind in fresh snow, they carved out their destiny anew, defying expectations set by society while grasping fiercely onto dreams long since buried beneath layers of oppression. In that fateful moment at midnight amid chaos turning into clarity, they became more than mere survivors. They were symbols of hope, ready to challenge everything that lay ahead. As the door to the jail swung open, Silas Boone stepped into the frigid night air, his presence filled with an enigmatic aura that captivated Nora. Covered in soot and coal dust, he looked like a man who had recently clawed his way back from the depths of darkness, each mark on him hinting at the struggles he must have endured during his time away from the town. The silhouette of his rugged figure contrasted sharply with the pristine snow swirling outside, creating a startling juxtaposition between light and dark. Nora couldn't help but linger on the details of his appearance. His once bright clothing was now worn and tattered, clinging closely to him as if it were a second skin. But it was not merely an old outfit. It was a testament to a life lived in hardship, a reminder of the furnace of labor where he had once thrived as a beloved blacksmith. The ash and grime etched into his face told stories of long days spent amid molten heat, shaped by pressure but transformed through the art he created. Silas's eyes, their deep-set familiarity, were fiercely alive despite the smudged exterior. They gleamed with resolve and wisdom, collected from experiences typically ignored by those untouched by similar trials. For Nora, those eyes held an invitation, a call to arms against all that had wronged them both. She felt an unspoken bond ignite between them, an understanding forged in the crucible of misfortune and resilience. As memories flooded back, Nora recalled the tales whispered around town about Silas's tragic fate. They said he had perished in a mining collapse, leaving behind not just a woman heartbroken over her lost love, but also a community wrestling with grief for a man they once respected. Yet, here he was, standing alive before her, defying death itself. The people of Wyoming might have forgotten him, but she had not. Silas had always been more than just a blacksmith. He embodied the hope and artistry that Providence still lingered. He seemed to drift closer through the swirling snow, his powerful presence grounding her in the tumult of uncertainty surrounding their situation. When Silas locked eyes with her, it was as if he saw her for who she truly was, not just as the woman imprisoned for standing up to wrongdoings, but as someone unyielding against forces determined to crush her spirit. "Silas," she breathed softly, the name escaping her lips like a prayer or an invocation of faith that things could change, real change that uprooted fears buried deep among societal expectations. That profound acknowledgement lingered in the moment between them. No words were necessary when they had faced down their demons independently and understood each other's plight through silent reflections. In this shared glance, no longer could they afford to be merely isolated souls wandering within oppressive systems alone. Together, at this intersection of fate, they would unite their strengths to confront tyranny and challenge an unjust narrative still longing to unfold. The air surrounding them crackled with potential as they stood on the cusp of something greater than themselves. Silas's silence resonated like thunder in her heart. He was ready to fight not only for her freedom, but also for all others caught beneath chains, inflicted by patriarchal prejudice and arrogance lurking menacingly like shadows cast over their lives. Instinctively urging Nora toward the doorway, now opened wide to possibilities beyond. The winds sang a howling chorus filled with renewal, beckoning courage aflame, gripping intertwined hands united against struggles, solidifying strength reclaimed within lives long oppressed yet eager for transformation, awaited boldly. Igniting bodies mustered steadied resolutely through adversity, flowing back, liberated identities arranged finely anew. In those fleeting moments surrounded by swirling snowflakes, drifting like dreams, unfulfilled, revealed yearning, Silas Boone emerged not merely as a savior, nor just a blacksmith thought dead long ago. Instead, he came as a symbol, manifest, a fragment of magic, resilience resting softly around kindled embers, drawing future closely coaxing onward, illuminating paths leading still far beyond doubts, aching expansive realms, guiding gently shared realities, plucking chords sorely wrested awake. Now, vibrating spirit engaged entirely, pursuing freedom, grown never fully loomed long, waited, reclaiming true identities arisen, embracing songs breaking free, destined singing journeys, laid trembling dew, kissed softly, awaiting heart uplift soaring toward equinox rays, heralding every dawn promising return, touched, gleaming, nurtured, reshaping, tomorrows emerging ever close-lit anew, believing holding tightly onto dreams, overcome together, vanquished reopening doors while traversing destined highways, bright gleaming journey forth, rising. Nora felt a surge of energy coursing through her as she locked eyes with Silas Boone, standing in the doorway like a figure from a forgotten tale. His nod conveyed more than words ever could. It was an acknowledgment of shared pain and an unspoken understanding that resonated deeply between them. In that brief moment amidst the howling winds and swirling snow, they both grasped the weight of their struggles and the resilience that had forged them into who they were. Each had faced their own demons. Silas, presumed dead by the town he once called home, had endured hardships in silence while forging a new identity under layers of soot and coal dust. Nora had battled against an oppressive society, where men wielded power to crush any hint of defiance. Yet here they were, two souls drawn together by their experiences, united against the tyranny that sought to silence them. As Silas stepped further into the jail, the heavy door creaked closed behind him, enveloping them in a sanctuary from the chaos outside. Nora could feel the tension in her chest easing slightly as he moved closer. The air was thick with possibility, a promise that they were no longer alone in their fight. "You're alive," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of disbelief and relief intertwined. There had been so many rumors about Silas's fate, each more tragic than the last. To see him now was like witnessing a miracle unfold before her very eyes. His presence filled the small space of the cell, his strong frame radiating warmth and strength. She noticed how the grime on his face only highlighted the fierce determination etched into his features. It was as if every hardship he had faced added to his resolve, turning him into something greater than an ordinary man, a symbol of hope and tenacity rising from ash. Silas met her gaze with intensity. His eyes spoke volumes about their shared experiences, of loss and struggle, but also of survival and courage. There was an unbreakable bond between them now, founded on mutual respect and a shared understanding shaped by lack and longing. They both bore scars, both seen and unseen, that marked their journey through life. With every breath they took, they acknowledged the burdens that weighed heavily on their shoulders, yet there was also a lightness in that shared space, a flicker of hope igniting within them as they stood at the threshold of change. "Let's get out of here," Silas said firmly, his voice steady and reassuring despite the tumult around them. He reached out a hand to Nora, inviting her to join him in this newfound liberation. The gesture held deep significance. It was not just about escaping the confines of her cell, but about stepping into a future where they could reclaim their lives. Feeling emboldened by his presence, Nora grasped his hand tightly. In that connection lay strength beyond measure. As he pulled her gently toward freedom, she felt an exhilarating rush swell within her, the remnants of fear dissipating to reveal determination and courage intertwined. Together they moved beyond the threshold of confinement into the night cloaked in snow, a world transformed by nature's touch where each flake sparkled like a new beginning. The chilling wind brushed against her cheeks, but did little to dampen the warmth growing inside her heart. With every step away from the jail, Nora sensed an awakening within herself, an urge to shed the expectations placed upon her and embrace the journey ahead alongside Silas. They were two souls ready to redefine their narratives and challenge everything that had held them back for far too long. As they ventured forth through swirling snowflakes illuminated by moonlight, Nora could feel that their connection went deeper than mere circumstance. It was woven intricately through threads of shared resilience against forces determined to keep them silent. Together, they would rise like phoenixes from ashes cast away, ready to confront whatever lay ahead with ferocity and grace. In those fleeting moments spent facing down uncertainty hand in hand, Nora realized that she would no longer allow herself or Silas to be defined by external pressures, but instead uplifted by each other's strengths forged within adversity, transforming dreams long kept buried beneath layers of oppression into vibrant realities waiting patiently to take flight. With the jail door swung wide open, a rush of cold air enveloped Nora and Silas, invigorating them as they stepped out into the night. The swirling snowflakes danced around them like confetti, but there was no time to celebrate. They had to move quickly and quietly, evading the townsfolk who would soon discover that a woman charged with disturbing the peace had just escaped from her cell. Silas led the way, his movements steady and purposeful despite the chaos of the storm. Nora followed closely, heart pounding with adrenaline and fear of being caught. The familiar streets of their town felt foreign under the blanket of snow. Every sound was amplified, every shadow seemed to loom larger in the dark. She glanced back at the jail one last time, its silhouette barely visible through falling snow, knowing she was leaving behind a place that had held her captive not only physically, but emotionally. As they slipped into an alleyway between two buildings, Silas turned to Nora with a serious look in his eyes. "We need to be careful," he urged quietly. "The townspeople are likely still celebrating at the saloon, but if anyone catches wind of our escape—" Nora nodded, understanding fully what was at stake. They were not just escaping from jail. They were breaking free from years of oppression and expectations that sought to silence them. The thought fueled her resolve. She had already defied Deputy Sheriff Wilkins. Now she was prepared to confront whatever awaited them outside these walls. They moved swiftly through narrow paths behind shops and homes, careful not to make too much noise. The muffled sounds of laughter and music floated through the air from the saloon, where townsfolk remained oblivious to their flight, illuminated by flickering lanterns and spirited conversations that masked any sense of urgency outside. As they made their way toward the edge of town, Silas paused momentarily to glance back over his shoulder. "Keep close," he instructed softly, before leading her further into the darkness. Nora could feel her heart racing as they approached a gathering of trees just beyond town limits, a natural barrier that would hide them from prying eyes. Once they reached it, she felt a sense of safety wrap around her like a warm blanket, despite the chill in the air. Here was a place where they could think clearly away from judgmental gazes. "Do you think they'll come after us?" Nora asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she caught her breath. Silas shook his head slowly, brushing dirt off his clothes while glancing around cautiously. "They might search for you because of Wilkins's pride," he replied grimly. "But if we keep moving and stay out of sight until dawn breaks, we can find a way out." Nora could see determination etched on Silas's face, the same fierce resolve she had admired long ago in him as a blacksmith shaping metal into art. Yet now it wasn't just artistry driving him. It was purpose born from hardship and survival against all odds. A sudden gust swept through the trees, sending branches swaying above them like anxious hands beckoning for liberation too. At that moment, it dawned on Nora that they were embarking on something greater than mere escape. They were actively reclaiming their freedom not just for themselves, but for others who had suffered silently under burdens placed upon them by society's rigid framework. As dawn approached slowly on the horizon behind thick layers of clouds filled with snow, tints of light began breaking through. Nora felt hope blossoming within her chest once more, alongside Silas, beside her determined spirit, guiding forth stirring inner strength, forged firmly over years spent facing darkness alone, now rising defiantly together, united, forging forward. They took off again, carefully navigating through unfamiliar terrain, while keeping an eye out for any signs indicating pursuit looming nearby, or danger lurking close, yet growing bolder with each footfall gaining momentum toward brighter. Tomorrows finally emerging, keenly alive, woven, intertwined, welcoming futures, awaiting brightly unfolding ahead. With whispers mingled between breaths shared amidst falling precipitation, beckoning glimmers rising upward, onward, chasing dreams long held captive at bay, now reclaimed boldly, crafting destinies, anew sewn tightly braided along pathways carved fearlessly ahead, promising touching lives, liberated, emboldened, rekindling hearts, once more dancing joyously alive. As the first light of dawn broke over the town of Wyoming, a delicate haze settled upon the freshly fallen snow, transforming the landscape into a breathtaking expanse of white. Yet the beauty of the morning was overshadowed by a palpable tension that gripped the townspeople. Whispers filled the streets as they gathered to discuss the events of the night. Nora Bell's daring escape from jail and Silas Boone's unexpected return. Outside the saloon, groups huddled together, their breath visible in the crisp air as they exchanged incredulous glances and hushed voices. "Did you see it?" one woman asked, her eyes wide with excitement and disbelief. "Silas is alive. We thought he died in that cave-in." Another man chimed in, shaking his head as if trying to dismiss the absurdity of it all. "But how could it be? A woman just walked out of jail with him. What sort of justice is that?" Amidst the murmurs of disbelief, skepticism brewed like a storm cloud hovering over their heads. The townsfolk had always held firm beliefs about law and order, yet now they were grappling with a reality that defied their expectations. For many, Nora's escape represented not just an act of rebellion, but also illuminated deeper fissures within their community and its values. "Do you think Wilkins will go after them?" Someone else wondered aloud, anxiety creeping into their tone. "He won't take this lightly." "Maybe he will," said another, "but who would believe him?" Half the town saw what happened. It was like something out of a story, a tale spun from fear. What they did not understand was that the events unfolding before them were steeped in truth and resilience rather than mere legend. For Nora and Silas, this was not just an escape. It was a reclamation of their identities from years spent under oppressive societal expectations. As they moved further away from the town limits, Silas turned to Nora, his expression serious yet protective. "We need to put some distance between us and them," he urged. "They'll be looking for us soon enough." Nora nodded, her heart racing at the thought of what lay ahead. Together they navigated through snowy pathways leading into wooded areas where silence reigned supreme. The snow crunched softly beneath their feet as they forged ahead, unaware of how their actions would ripple through the fabric of their community. Paradoxically, while Nora felt the burden of fear lift somewhat with each step taken away from confinement, she also knew that the journey before them would not be easy. They were no longer just escaping physical shackles. They were endeavoring toward a future rife with uncertainty, but ripe with possibility. While dawn unfolded above them, its warm hues casting gentle shadows across snowy landscapes, Nora began to contemplate what freedom truly meant. It was not merely running away from something, but rather stepping toward something greater. A chance to redefine her narrative as a woman who had once been silenced by societal norms. Back in town, conversations continued to swirl like autumn leaves caught in gusts of wind, some echoing admiration for Nora's boldness, while others steeped in indignation at her perceived defiance. Many wrestled with conflicting feelings about justice. Questions arose regarding whether it was right for a woman like her to break free without consequence. As word spread about Silas's miraculous return and Nora's audacious flight, some began to wonder if perhaps this was indeed justice served, a challenge against patriarchal authority long taken for granted. Others dismissed these notions as fanciful talk born from excitement rather than reason. Yet, as Nora and Silas pressed forward into uncharted territory bathed softly beneath daylight, breaking through clouds overhead, every moment shared became woven tapestry. Rich, vibrantly colored threads blending collectively, seeking brighter futures that had too long awaited acknowledgement, shining brightly, illuminating roads once treacherously darkened, beckoning souls onward, inviting new beginnings, promising hope, reborn, lovingly embraced unfurling instincts, driving alongside possibilities, endless awaiting discovery, filled nobly expansive dreams, now realized dancing unencumbered free. In those moments spent forging ahead together amid swirling pathways leading ever onward, Nora understood truly what it meant to reclaim autonomy. Hand in hand, they challenged everything that had once sought to confine them, willing to confront whatever challenges lay just beyond horizon, stretching far, reaching inviting leaps into vastness, alive embracing every heartbeat, yearning toward liberation, freshly birthed, unyielding freedom, soaring, fiercely proud. As the sun continued to rise, casting golden light over the town, the air buzzed with conversations and speculation. The townspeople gathered in clusters outside their homes, their breath visible in the crisp morning air as they discussed the events of the night before. Some wore expressions of disbelief, while others donned looks of excitement mixed with apprehension. Whispers weaved through the crowd like tendrils of smoke. "Did you hear? Nora Bell has escaped, and Silas Boone, he's alive," exclaimed one young woman, her eyes shining with a mix of awe and disbelief. "But how could that be?" a skeptical voice retorted from the back. "Everyone thought Silas was dead. It's like a story out of a bedtime book. This isn't real." "I saw it with my own eyes," insisted another man, his voice rising with indignation. "It was no ghost. They both slipped out right under our noses." "What does that say about our own law?" Amidst the chatter, emotions ran high. Some townsfolk felt a growing surge of admiration for Nora's bravery. She had defied a system that had long oppressed women and marginalized voices. Others felt unease creeping in, fear of what they did not yet understand. The town had always been guided by strict rules, traditions that dictated how people should behave, especially women. Now, with Nora's escape and Silas's return, those rules felt more fragile than ever. In the saloon, where laughter had once rung out in celebration, discussions turned more serious. Men huddled together around tables, their voices lowered as they debated the implications of last night's events. "If Wilkins can't keep order," one man growled, "what kind of authority do we really have?" A few older patrons shook their heads knowingly, recalling their youth when such rebellious actions would have been unthinkable. "This is a different time," an elderly man murmured thoughtfully. "Maybe something needs to change." However, for every voice that spoke of change, there were others that feared it. A group of women entered the saloon, their expressions grave as they discussed what this meant for them. "It's all well and good to cheer for Nora," one said, "but what about the consequences? She'll bring trouble upon us all." Fear mingled with loyalty as people grappled with conflicting feelings about justice and rebellion. Many admired Nora's courage, yet also feared the repercussions of her defiance. Would she become a rallying point for change or a target for anger? Would this act of rebellion inspire others, or would it lead to a backlash against those who dared to challenge authority? As they mulled over these thoughts, whispers began to circulate about Wilkins's potential response. "He won't let this go easily," someone warned. "If anything happens to Nora or Silas, he will make sure everyone pays." Outside, life continued on the streets. Children played in the snow while adults bustled about their daily tasks. But a new undercurrent of tension rippled just beneath the surface of the town's routine. The familiar landscape now felt different. Cracks were beginning to show in the facade of order that had once seemed unshakable. Meanwhile, as Nora and Silas pressed forward into the wilderness beyond town limits, they felt distant from the chatter and speculation swirling behind them. Each step taken away from that life gave them strength. They were forging their own path now, no longer bound by what others thought or expected. "I wonder what they'll say about us," Nora mused aloud as they walked through the trees, their branches heavy with snow. "They'll say whatever fits their narrative," Silas replied thoughtfully, brushing snow from his coat. "But it doesn't matter what they think anymore. We're writing our own story now." Nora smiled at him, a genuine smile filled with gratitude. The bond they shared was forged in resilience. Together they were facing uncertainties head-on while embracing new opportunities for freedom and identity beyond what society had dictated. As dawn illuminated their path ahead, casting away remnants of night's shadows lingering behind them, both Nora and Silas knew there would be challenges waiting on this journey toward liberation, but felt emboldened by their choices and united in purpose. They were ready to confront whatever lay ahead with courage and strength that transcended the limitations imposed upon them. As Silas and Nora pressed deeper into the wilderness, the morning light began to illuminate their path, casting a soft glow on the snowy landscape that surrounded them. Each step felt like a reclaiming of their narratives, an act of defiance against the societal constraints that had sought to define them. They were no longer just a fugitive and a presumed dead man. They had become symbols of hope and change, representing the courage needed to challenge authority and instigate transformation in their community. However, the events of the night resonated in their minds as they moved forward. For Nora, it had become so much more than merely escaping from jail. It was about standing up against years of oppression. Silas's presence by her side felt like a tangible reminder that they were not alone in this fight. His silent strength and unwavering determination bolstered her confidence as they faced the uncertainties ahead. Back in town, reactions to the jailbreak continued to unfold, creating an atmosphere thick with speculation and conflicting emotions. As the townspeople exchanged opinions, old loyalties were tested, and new alliances began to form. Conversations buzzed through the streets, some praising Nora's bravery, while others condemned her actions as reckless. "What kind of justice is it when a woman walks out of jail with a man thought dead?" asked one man, his voice heavy with skepticism. "What does that say about our law?" "You all saw it happen," a woman countered fiercely, her cheeks flushed with indignation. "Nora stood up for herself. If we don't support her now, what kind of town are we living in?" Amidst the discussions, fear loomed large. The authorities would not remain silent or passive in response to what had transpired. Many wondered how Deputy Sheriff Wilkins would react. His wounded pride would likely drive him to seek retribution. Would he make an example of Nora if he caught up with her again? The townsfolk could already sense that tensions were rising, and many felt a creeping anxiety about the potential fallout. As rumors spiraled through the community like autumn leaves caught in an unexpected whirlwind, some voiced concerns that Nora's actions might bring unwelcome scrutiny and chaos upon them all. "This could lead to violence," an older woman warned as she wrung her hands together. "We can't afford to be seen as harboring criminals." Yet, from this discord emerged a quiet undercurrent of support for those who dared to stand against oppression. Some townsfolk reflected on their own experiences, moments when they too felt stifled by tradition or silenced by authority. The stories they shared became threads woven into a tapestry of resilience and solidarity. Meanwhile, Silas and Nora continued their journey through the forest, every step away from the town filled with both uncertainty and exhilaration. The weight of their pasts still hung heavy, but was now intertwined with a sense of purpose. Silas turned to Nora, his expression earnest but tinged with apprehension. "We may not know what awaits us," he said quietly, "but we can face it together." Nora smiled at him, feeling emboldened by their partnership. "Together," she echoed, her heart swelling with determination as they ventured further into uncharted territory. No longer bound by expectations or fear, they felt invigorated by the possibilities stretching out before them, a chance to reshape their futures on their own terms. The rustle of leaves and crunch of snow beneath their feet accompanied their thoughts as they forged ahead, knowing that they were not just escaping confinement, but rather stepping into a world filled with both peril and promise. Whatever challenges lay ahead would be met with courage. Even amidst moral ambiguity surrounding justice and authority in their community, they were prepared to carve out new destinies. As dawn illuminated the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, it signified not just a new day, but also new beginnings for Nora and Silas. They would no longer allow anyone else to dictate who they were or what they could become. Instead, they would stand as beacons of hope, a testament to the belief that true justice could arise from courage fused with loyalty among those brave enough to embrace change. In this moment of clarity and purpose, Nora understood that justice was not only about laws or consequences. It was about reclaiming one's voice and dignity against all odds. Hand in hand with Silas, she felt ready to challenge everything that lay ahead, an unyielding force ignited by passion and resilience waiting to be unleashed upon those who had long stood in silence.